Hey everybody, it's Renee. Today we're going to talk about James chapter 5, verses 19 and 20. It says, "My brothers, if anyone among you wanders from the truth and someone brings him back, remember this. Whoever turns a sinner from the error of their way will save them from death and cover over a multitude of sins." So this is how James ends his letter, not with a doctrinal summary, not with a formal benediction, with a missing person. After 5 chapters of calling the church to integrity in trials, in favoritism, in speech, in faith, in prayer, James closes with his eyes on the one who has drifted away from all of it, the wanderer, the one who used to be here and is not anymore. And his final word to the church is not a command to guard the truth from the outside. It is a charge to go after the one who has walked away from it. The letter ends mid-reach. Jesus uses the word planaō for wandering, the same root that gives us the word planet, those ancient lights that moved against the fixed stars, slowly tracing paths no one could fully predict. Wandering from the truth rarely announces itself. It is seldom a dramatic departure. More often, it is a series of small movements, each one reasonable enough on its own. A skipped Sunday that becomes a skipped month, a doubt left unaddressed that quietly hardens into distance, a wound from someone in the church that never healed and eventually became reason enough to stop coming back. You can usually see it before the person themselves can name it. The engagement that used to be there is gone. The conversations that once ran deep now stay on the surface. Something has shifted, and they are farther from where they were than they realize. James does not describe this person as an enemy to be avoided or a problem to be managed. He describes them as a brother or sister who has wandered. The relationship is still intact, the belonging is still real. They've simply drifted, and someone needs to go after them. James does not assign this work to a committee. He says, if someone brings him back, one person moving toward one wanderer with enough relational investment to make the conversation possible. This is not the work of programs or announcements. It's the work of someone who notices the absence, who remembers their name, who picks up the phone or shows up at the door because they cannot make peace with the drift. The Greek word here used for brings back is the same verb Jesus uses in Luke 22:32 when he tells Peter that after his own failure, he should strengthen his brothers. It's the word of a full reversal, a 180-degree turn from the path leading somewhere dangerous back toward the path leading home. That kind of turn rarely happens in isolation. It usually happens because someone came alongside and walked back with them, not with a lecture or a list of everything they got wrong, but with presence, with truth spoken in love, with the simple and powerful message that the door is still open and there's still a place at the table. That requires relationship built before the crisis. The person best positioned to go after the wanderer is not a stranger with a well-prepared argument. It is someone who has shared enough life with them that their arrival at the door means something. Someone whose presence says, "You matter enough for me to come find you." James does not soften what he's describing. The wanderer is drifting toward death. In the Greek word that he uses here means final and the grave, not metaphorical distance, actual spiritual death, the consequence of turning away from the truth that gives life. And James saw that the wanderer often cannot. Spiritual death has a way of wearing the mask of, "I'm fine." The drift feels manageable from the inside. Every step away from the path feels like a reasonable response to something, a hurt, a doubt, a disappointment, a season of life that quietly swallowed the faith. What looks like slow erosion from the outside feels like personal adjustment from the inside. This is why the rescue cannot wait. The wanderer is not likely to recognize the danger they are in until someone who loves them names it, not as condemnation, but as an honest word from someone who can see what they cannot. This is why James ends his letter here. The stakes are real, and the response to real stakes is not grief from a distance, it is pursuit. And in verse 20, he carries the promise that makes the pursuit worthwhile, and it is more extravagant than we usually pause to appreciate. Whoever turns a sinner from the error of their way will save them from death and cover over a multitude of sins. That word cover is present and active, ongoing. It does not describe a single moment of forgiveness at the point of return. It describes a covering that keeps draping, keeps sheltering, keeps healing long after the embrace of the door. James is reaching back to the same grace that clothed Adam and Eve in the garden and wrapped the prodigal in his father's robe before the party even started. And the word that he uses for save is the same word used when the woman who touched the hem of Jesus's garment was made whole in Mark 5:34. Not merely rescued from one bad outcome, but made whole. Body, soul, story, nothing left behind. The wandering was a slow bleed, and the return is a transfusion. Heaven's arithmetic here is, as it always is, very scandalous. One conversation over bad coffee. One text that says, "Hey, I noticed you were gone." One person who refuses to pretend the absence is fine. And the result is a soul pulled back from death and a multitude of sins buried under an avalanche of grace. One act of faithful pursuit, one multitude covered. There's one more thing worth saying about this closing promise because James buries it quietly and it deserves to be found. The rescue does not only change the wanderer, it changes the one who goes after them. To go after someone who has drifted requires honesty about your own story, the times that you were the one who wandered, the grace that came to find you, the hand that was extended when you had stopped expecting one. That honest reckoning softens the rescuer as much as it reaches the wanderer. You do not go as someone who has never been lost. You go as someone who knows what it is to be found. And the covering of sins James promises falls in both directions. In the economy of God's grace, the act of going after the one is itself a participation in the mercy that covers. The rescuer and the rescued both leave the encounter changed. This is the community that James has been building toward through every chapter of this letter, one where the suffering are prayed over, the honest are protected, the wandering are pursued, and no one is left to drift unnoticed to the edge. James ends the letter with a question he never directly asks, but makes impossible to avoid. Who's missing? Not the person who left for another church, not the one who moved away, the one whose absence has a specific shape, a face you recognize was gone, a name that surfaces when you pray, a conversation you've been meaning to have for longer than you wanted to admit. That person is the reason James ends here, not with a doxology, not with a summary, with a door left open and a charge to go find the one who has stopped coming through it. You do not need a prepared argument. You do not need answers to every question that may have caused the drift. You need to show up. You need to say, in whatever words fit the relationship, "I noticed you were gone. There is still a place for you. Come back." Go before they reach the bottom. Go before the drift becomes a decision. Go while the rope is still long enough to reach. The Father is already scanning the horizon. The robe is already folded. The table is already set. Go after the one. Who comes to mind when you read this passage? Someone whose drift you have noticed but not yet addressed. Name them specifically before God today, then identify one concrete step, a text, a visit, a phone call, and take it before the week is out. Is there something in your own story of wandering and return that you have never shared with anyone? Consider whether God may be asking you to offer that story, not as a lecture, but as a light to someone who needs to know the door is still open. So we're finished the book of James. He did not write a theology textbook. He wrote a letter, urgent, direct, addressed to real people living real lives under real pressure. And he sealed it, as we have seen, not with a summary, but with a sent man. Go after the one who is wandering. That's his final word. That is the posture the entire letter has been building toward. Looking back across these 5 chapters, there's a single thread runs through all of it. Faith that cannot be seen is not faith. It is opinion. It is preference. It is at best a starting point that has not yet become anything. James will not let us make the mistake, the beginning of belief for the whole of it. He presses us chapter by chapter toward the place where we say we believe becomes visible in what we actually do, in how we treat the poor man at the door, in how we use our words, in whether we pray for the sick or simply feel sorry for them, in whether we go after the wanderer or wait for them to find their own way back. This is not a works-based gospel. James is not telling us we earn our standing before God through effort. He is telling us that genuine faith, the kind that has actually taken root in a person, produces something. A tree that produces no fruit is not a humble fruit tree. It is a dead one. James is calling us to examine whether what we have is alive. This letter has moved us through a great deal of territory. Trials are not interruptions to the life of faith. They are the conditions under which faith matures into something that can hold weight. The brother in humble circumstances and the rich man in his fading glory are both called to the same posture before the same God, which means neither poverty nor prosperity is the point. The posture is the point. Favoritism is not a minor social failing. It's a fracture in the foundation of a community that claims to love as God loves. The moment we assign worth based on what someone can do for us, we have stepped outside the royal law. James does not soften this. The tongue is not a small problem, it's the tell. What comes out of the mouth in an unguarded moment reveals what the heart has been holding. Wisdom that produces envy and disorder is not wisdom from above, regardless of how confidently it is delivered. The wisdom that comes from God is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy. That is the standard. Wealth is not neutral. The way we hold it, spend it, and think about it reveals whether we trust God or trust accumulation. The laborers whose wages were withheld still cry out, and their cry has reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. That has not changed. Prayer is not a last resort. It is the first language of a community that knows it is dependent. The prayer of faith over the sick, the prayer of confession with a trusted brother or sister, the persistent prayer of a righteous person. These are not optional practices for the especially devout. They are the normal rhythms of a church that is alive. And the wanderer is not a lost cause. They are the final concern of a letter written by a man who understood, better than most, what it means to have been wrong about Jesus and to have been brought back. James was the brother of the Lord who did not believe in him during his earthly ministry. He watched from a distance all the way through the crucifixion, and then the risen Christ appeared to him. Paul records it plainly in 1 Corinthians 15:7, and everything changed. The skeptic became the shepherd of Jerusalem. The doubter became the man who wrote, "Consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kinds." He knew what it was to wander. He knew what it was to be brought back, and so he wrote a letter to the people who were struggling to hold their faith together under pressure. And he told them the truth without softening it, because he loved them enough to say the hard thing, and because he knew the God he was pointing them toward was worth every demand the letter made. This is the invitation James leaves with us. Not comfort without cost, not faith without feet, not a community that gathers on Sunday and scatters without consequence on Monday. A community where the suffering are prayed over and not simply sympathized with, where the poor are seated at the front, where words are chosen carefully because they matter, where confession happens between real people in real relationship, where prayer is persistent and specific and offered in genuine faith, where the wanderer is pursued before they reach the edge. This is what the letter of James looks like when it is lived. It is not tidy, it is not comfortable, but it is real and it is alive, and it looks more like Jesus than most of what passes for Christianity in a hurried world. Go back to chapter 1 when the trials come. Go back to chapter 2 when the temptation to play favorites rises. Go back to chapter 3 when the words start to get ahead of the wisdom. Go back to chapter 4 when the plans start leaving God out. Go back to chapter 5 when someone you love is sick or struggling or drifting. The letter was written for the long road, not just the first reading. It holds up under the weight of a life actually lived in its life. Thanks for doing this journey with me. See you later.